We're in the middle of the channel, and this is a sanctioned Russian vessel. Her name's the Universal. She's travelled from Russia. She's currently sailing with an escort, a frigate, the Admiral Grogovich. Now behind them is the RFA Tide Force. She's a Royal Fleet auxiliary tanker that's been following these vessels as they make their way through the channel. Now it's estimated that since January, about 500 sanctioned Russian ships have crossed through British waters.
A few moments later.
The Prime Minister spoke to President Trump from Qatar this evening. The Prime Minister set out his discussions with Gulf leaders and military planners in the region on the need to restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz.
You guys seemed to really enjoy this story yesterday, so I figured we might as well follow up on it, because Europe is beginning to realize what NATO would look like without America, and they don't like it. And so in the most predictable fashion possible, Keir Starmer in the UK are now crawling back to the US, begging Trump to help put NATO back together. Of course, after a whole month of opposing our actions in the Middle East, claiming this was not our war, suddenly now Starmer is in the Middle East begging and offering his services to Trump with helping out in the Strait of Hormuz, although given the current dismal state of the Royal Navy, I'm not sure Britain can actually offer anything substantial. But why the sudden about face? Why the gesture? Well, if you watched our video yesterday, you would know that the very moment it seemed like NATO was coming undone, Europe and America no longer had a mutual defense consensus, guess who started showing up? Russia. That is right. We told you about how within the past couple of days, Russia's Navy has shown up in the North Sea. They're even sending literal warships through the English Channel. This comes after Keir Starmer threatened that he would start to seize Russian oil tankers that cross the channel. And instead of backing off, instead of just routing somewhere else, I kid you not, Russia literally says, okay, we are going to send destroyers, cruisers, or battleships through the channel. And what are you going to do about it? Are you going to try to seize the tanker then? And guess what Keir Starmer did? Absolutely nothing. Why is Russia engaging in this behavior, by the way? Because they smell weakness. They know that all of these European leaders just talk. They know it's a paper tiger, and if perhaps historically Russia might have avoided doing something like this because they don't want to antagonize the real power player in NATO, which is of course America, Putin clearly understands right now, Trump's been making it very clear to Europe, you don't help us, we're not going to help you. And notice how suddenly the big bad Russia, right, the very country that all of these center-left liberal European parties claim they're super against, and that's the mortal enemy. Notice how without America, notice how when you don't side with Trump, Russia starts to humiliate you. It is quite the spectacle to watch. But anyways, we do have some updates on this story here today, because apparently the UK tried to do a show of force in response. They tried to retaliate in a sense against Russia, and it was a complete joke. And now as a result, right, suddenly when the Russians are knocking on the door, European countries are in panic, and we're seeing a complete reversal in rhetoric as it pertains to the Strait of Hormuz, although we're still waiting on the action. And I have to say, this is a very easy thing to propose when you're already in a ceasefire agreement. And by the way, all that said, it might be way too late for this anyway, right? The message has been sent, right? We've already taken notes of the way Europe and NATO allies behave throughout this conflict. But anyways, with all of that said, we'll get into this here today. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, not to gloat or anything, but let's start off by remembering what we've been hearing from Keir Starmer on America and helping out in Iran for a very long time. This is historically America's closest military ally, and notice how those relations don't seem to be like that anymore.
I'm fed up with the fact that families across the country see their bills go up and down on energy, businesses' bills go up and down on energy because of the actions of Putin or Trump across the world.
And that's interesting. Let's examine that. So he's fed up with both Trump and Putin, yet he won't do anything about either one. Let's go through that. On one hand, Trump. He claims he's mad at America for making energy prices in his own country more expensive, and yet has not wanted to do anything thus far serious, actionable in terms of helping with the Strait of Hormuz besides strongly worded statements. A little bit strange. On the flip side, Putin. I think this is no secret, by the way, that no matter how much all of these European leaders like to cast Russia as their big, bad, mortal enemy, they're quietly all, as a continent, still funding the Russian war effort by buying Russia's oil and natural gas. They claim to have these sanctions in place, but obviously there's all these ways to circumvent that. And in the end, they're simply giving Russia arguably even more money. By the way, I think I remember a particular US president back in 2018. Who was president? Oh, the same one, who tried to famously warn the Europeans, stop buying Russian oil and natural gas, stop this energy reliance on Russia, it's dangerous. They didn't listen. They sat there and laughed at him quite literally. If you remember the videos of the German delegation laughing at him in the room, and we of course know what happened next. But supposedly you're fed up with Putin or something like that. By the way, if you're so fed up with Putin, then aren't you going to do something, right? You're going to do something about the battleships, or warships, I should say, that are currently crossing the English Channel. Well, we covered the story yesterday about how the UK has done absolutely nothing about it. They still allowed the supposedly sanctioned Russian vessels to cross the channel. Let's not forget the only NATO power thus far who actually has had the guts to seize sanctioned Russian energy following the toppling of Maduro, if you remember that story, was actually the United States. By the way, these are the same Europeans who claim to be against Russia, yet when we took action against two of Russia's top allies, and in the case of Iran, arguably Russia's #1 military ally, these people stand here and oppose us. But anyways, I guess the good news, if you're Keir Starmer, is the fact that the British Navy did respond yesterday to the Russian ship that was crossing the channel there. Except here's the quite hilarious part about it. So I guess they sent this naval tanker or something like that to go and monitor the situation, right? Follow the Russian ship through the water. Except I kid you not, the lone ship which quote unquote escorted the oil tankers and Russian frigates through the English Channel was not even armed. That's right. They followed the Russians through with absolutely no guns, and still in the end, guess what? Did they seize the tanker like they were vowing to, like Keir Starmer said he would? Absolutely not. They just let them sail through their very own territorial waters. As you can see, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary vessel would have had little effect or impact in deterring anything larger than a fishing trawler, considering they have no guns. So there you have it. Here's the big, bad, tough Royal Navy, their big, bad, tough foreign policy. Super anti-Putin, by the way, is when we basically give you a guided escort through our own channel while doing absolutely nothing to stop you. Everyone give a round of applause.
Breaking this really upset me. So, okay, we've got a Russian warship, which they do this quite often. Yeah. It's going through the channel, escorting these two naval vessels, but two fingers up to the British going, what are you going to do about it, Governor?
And it's been shuttered by a British ship.
And this British ship is a top warship that could absolutely seize these vessels. It could shoot down that, it could shoot that Russian warship into the bottom of the sea, couldn't it?
No, it's Royal Fleet Auxiliary. It's not even manned by Royal Navy personnel.
Tell me about the ship. Tell me.
And it is carrying cornflakes and bacon sandwich resupplies from me, because I'm the bacon sandwich king. It's a resupply ship. It's Tesco's on the seas, or Aldi on the seas, or other supermarkets are available for the Royal Navy. That's it.
It's just embarrassing. Thing is, we've got our budget like 60 billion on our defences. I know there's a hell of a lot that goes on Trident, and that's an extra cost that a lot of other countries that aren't nuclear powers don't have, and I'm glad we've got it. But where the hell does all the money go?
That is a fantastic question, and this is a $64 trillion question, and that is what the government needs to address, because the Ministry of Defence is terrible at wasting our money. Yeah. Project after project after project gets wasted, and that's why we've got billions of money just being splashed up against the wall.
Yeah, and again, we never it arrives late, it arrives three times as much, and then often it's obsolete or it doesn't work. Yeah.
I mean, how is that even real? The Royal Navy showed up to respond to Russia, yet they brought no guns. Apparently, they just brought food for the Russians so that way they could be well fed while they were crossing the English Channel. By the way, this is what NATO looks like without America. Okay, you wonder why this is happening. You wonder why Russia had the nerve to do this, because they absolutely knew the British were not going to do anything to respond. And it's hilarious because, you know, the Labor Party, the Democrats in America, collectively, these are all the same leftists who said for years that MAGA and Trump were bought out by Putin, right? I've been accused of being pro-Russia many different times simply because I may have disagreements with the global liberals in terms of how we believe the Ukraine conflict should have been handled these past few years. But let me just say, as the supposed Putin stooge or Russian asset here, that had this been me, had I been the leader of any country, no, I would not allow Russia to humiliate me in my own waters like that. Yes, I would have blockaded it. Yes, in some way or another, I would have not let that happen. And certainly, let me just put it this way, my naval response would have brought guns, okay? Because again, no matter how much you want to accuse me of being, you know, Russia this, Russia that, and it's been going on since 2016, for those of you who have good memories, this is not something I, or frankly, any conservative around the world would allow to happen. No, you're not sending warships through our own channel in our own territorial waters. That's ridiculous, but look at how much these supposed Russia, anti-Russia liberals just let it happen. Look at the paper tigers that they are, right? And in total fairness, perhaps the reason this happened is because, unfortunately, even if the Royal Navy did want to respond, they'd have very little ability, as we've pointed out, but even a post like here states. So the Royal Navy, by the numbers, and keep in mind, 100 years ago, Britain used to rule the waves quite famously. In 1939, the UK, not even America, not Japan, not anyone else, the UK had the strongest and largest navy in the world. Look at the state it's in now. How many frigates do they have in total? 7. Only 3 are available. They have 6 total destroyers, but only 1 is available. That is the HMS Dragon, the same destroyer we told you about yesterday. Literally had to go back to port for repairs. It's not even working, and it's only been deployed for a couple days. And this is the same ship that took them 3 weeks to even get in the water to begin with. 3 weeks to deploy it. Within the first few days, it breaks down. So really, you could say there are 0 available. That's a complete joke. 20,000 total naval sailors, 40 admirals, 90 commodores, and 55,000 civil servants. So you can see the issue here, right? They literally have more admirals than warships. They have twice the number of civil servants than they do actual military men in the Navy. This is this. And by the way, you know, you wonder why, for example, the UK did not want us to get involved in Iran. They've been calling for a ceasefire. They said they don't want to help out with the Strait of Hormuz. No matter how much the Europeans want to sit here and claim it's out of virtue, oh, we believe in peace, we want geopolitical stability, it has nothing to do with that. It's actually the fact that they, you know, it's again, as I said yesterday, it's very easy to call for peace when you have no ability to make war. That's not virtuous. That's just pure weakness. That's basically begging for mercy in itself, right? It's only meaningful. It only actually has virtue behind it to call for peace if you actually have the ability to fight to back it up, right? In that case, you're standing down because you're a genuinely good person, not just because you don't want to fight. But that's exactly right. What is going on with Europe? So in total fairness to them, when we sit here and wonder, where are they? Why don't they come get their own oil out of the Strait of Hormuz? Well, considering even a country like Britain, the mighty British Empire, no longer even has a functional navy, this should not be a big mystery. And to be clear, this is not something that I gloat about or laugh about. I genuinely think it is sad and pitiful, okay? Again, the UK used to rule the waves, rules the world's oceans, and in less than 100 years, this is the current state. It's very sad. Make Britain great again, literally. It's actually depressing to me, okay? Just something I like to point out. You kind of hope that Britain, to an extent, this ought to be a wake-up call for them. You know, remember who you are, because it's just sad. You know, don't like to watch it, actually, as a matter of fact. And as I pointed out in this post, you know, these same Europeans are the people who claim to have a serious anti-Russia policy. They're accusing Trump of breaking apart NATO. Yet Trump attacked Russia's top military ally, and Europe opposed it. That is, of course, Iran. They support Ukraine, but they don't support stopping the country, Iran, that is supplying Russia the very drones that are currently devastating in Ukraine. Literally, that's been Russia's arguably most important military weapon on the battlefield, is Iranian drones, and yet they're crying, no, we support Iran, but we're super anti-Russia, right? And the same goes for Venezuela, Cuba, China, even the energy policies that we discussed earlier. Europe has no actual anti-Russia policy. It's just virtue signaling. And as I theorized before, I think a lot of these liberal leaders simply give anti-Putin speeches to win re-election because it rallies your people around this shared enemy, you know, this boogeyman, this bad guy. Oh, they're invading us. They're threatening our sovereignty. Russia is not invading France or the UK or Germany anytime soon. They know that, but it's good propaganda. So that way it covers the actual domestic failures of, hey, we've allowed an insane migration crisis, an insane crime crisis. Our economy sucks. Our taxes are too high. Our best people are leaving our countries, right? No. Worry about Ukraine instead. Because you notice, right? Every time Trump has done something actionable that actually hurts Russia, and by the way, America can take those actions because we actually have the ability to fight. Unlike these virtue signaling European countries, they stood there and opposed it. So, just something to consider. But with all of that in mind, right? And the central theme here is what? These countries clearly see what Russia does to them without America backing them up, right? Russia is just eating their lunch and humiliating them. Even the once great Royal Navy is being totally stood up, right, by the Russian Navy. Now, last night, we had Keir Starmer showing up on a trip to the Middle East, and guess what he is now suddenly starting to do? Begging to help out with reopening the Strait of Hormuz, allegedly. With what Navy? We don't know. I guess they're going to send the food ship again. Take a listen.
Just got some developing news that's just come into us in the last few minutes from Downing Street. And a Downing Street spokesperson has said that the Prime Minister spoke to President Trump from Qatar this evening. The Prime Minister set out his discussions with Gulf leaders and military planners in the region on the need to restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the UK's efforts to convene partners to agree to a viable plan. They agreed that now there is a ceasefire in place, an agreement to open the strait. We are at the next stage of finding a resolution. The leaders discussed the need for a practical plan to get shipping moving again as quickly as possible. They agreed to speak again soon. So that was the Prime Minister statement coming from Downing Street, that the Prime Minister has spoken to President Trump from Qatar.
Wait, but I thought Keir and Trump were done with each other, and all of the sudden, now that Russia is knocking on the door, suddenly the UK is offering to help. Really interesting how that works. And look, in total fairness, I don't think that Russia is the only factor here. Likewise, the fuel crisis definitely has something to do with it. For example, right across the water in Ireland, we see truckers and farmers already starting to go on strike and block the roads because of the fact that they're currently protesting high fuel prices. And this is a pretty universal trend that we're seeing across Europe. By the way, the prediction I made weeks ago is that the longer this goes, eventually NATO is going to have to do something about the Strait of Hormuz, not because they want to or because they're in love with Trump, but because their own domestic economies cannot simply handle the fuel crisis that would come with not actually working out a solution there, right? It would be something out of necessity. So that I kind of said the entire time on many different fronts. Energy is the leverage that Trump and America have, not just over Europe, but over the entire world, right? The fact that we are energy independent, the fact that we're a huge energy exporter that the rest of the world kind of needs right now, the fact that these other countries cannot survive without the Strait of Hormuz, all a bunch of reasons you put together and say, I'm not sure that these countries' mean words against Trump are actually going to be backed up by action, which I certainly believe is true. However, at the same time, you cannot doubt the coincidence of this timing, right? All of the sudden that Russia shows up in the channel and it's this huge political scandal on the same week, you have Keir Starmer now making a little bit of a concession, you might say, reaching out and having phone calls with President Trump. It's certainly interesting behavior to watch. And I'd point out, even the UK is not alone in this. Merz came out today and said that Germany will back the Hormuz Sea mission if mandated. I don't know what that means. Mandated by whom exactly? Maybe it's a translation error. I'm not sure, but it sounds like a little more openness maybe than it was before. Similar behavior out of Italy, even, who thus far has not really, even Meloni necessarily, has not been that much on America's side in Iran. But you're noticing, again, this sudden shift in tone on the same week, coincidentally, when clearly NATO sees how useless it would be without America.
The Secretary General of NATO's comments that NATO may be willing to play a role in the possible Strait of Hormuz mission if it's able to. Italy was asked if it's willing to assist the United States. A spokesperson for Italy and the Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said, we'll see how the conversation with the Hormuz group goes. Could you potentially see a role for NATO here, whether it's military escorts, as we saw back during the Reagan administration, or maybe it's some sort of NATO protectorate as a bulwark against Iran? Can you see a role for NATO here?
I can see a role probably for a coalition of the willing. I don't know that NATO per se would be the organization that would lead that. It's not impossible. The problem is here that there aren't that many of the countries that are willing to put their ships at risk. They do have some considerable capability. If it comes to demining, for example, the UK Navy actually has some very valuable assets in that regard. We used to prepare for this and train with them when I was the commander of U.S. Central Command. So I would hope that there would be involvement. And I thought that Rutte yesterday was terrific, or today, as he always is, recognizing, I think quite forthrightly, he understands and appreciates President Trump's frustration in this case.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. However, are we sure that any of these countries actually have navies? They actually have ships, you know? They might exist on paper. The UK might have minesweepers, which, by the way, would be very useful right now, given the fact that Iran has apparently lost its own mines in the Strait of Hormuz and is telling America they can't even find them. Okay, so we need a minesweeper at the moment. The UK historically actually has that more and does it better than America. However, does the minesweeper even exist, right? Or is it technically existing on paper, but it would take 3 to 5 years to even mobilize that? And then the week it leaves the water, it would already get broken down and come back again and not even be able to fulfill its mission? Because that thus far has seemed to be the trend out of the British Navy. And I don't know, the French Navy, the German Navy, are they actually going to be better? I'm not exactly sure. But nonetheless, you can clearly see it is a pretty dismal defense situation out of Europe at the moment. And we repeat, it's unacceptable, it's sad, it's pitiful, okay? For whatever reason, I guess post-World War II and especially post-Cold War, a lot of these countries have just assumed they no longer need to have functional militaries, or hey, America's going to protect us anyway, right? So, you know, spend it all on free healthcare and paying for illegals and stuff like this, and then look at what's and then raise taxes simultaneously, and then look what's happening now, right? Turns out having a strong national defense is like actually a good thing. I know that's controversial, but you know, to Britain, seriously, like, where's your pride? I understand regular British people still have it and they're pissed off at the situation, but seriously, there has to be a moment as a civilization. You say, what happened to us? What are we now? Where's our pride? Okay? We spent centuries having the best Navy in the world, and then this is us now. What is going on? You know? We don't even have a gunned ship that we can have to respond to the Russians. We can't get a single destroyer working. Allegedly, a bunch of our guys are just doing cocaine and drugs on our nuclear submarines. What is going on with our military? Good question. Good question. I don't know. So maybe to an extent, America cutting these nations loose long-term would be a good thing, because it would force them to actually do something for themselves, you know? It would force Britain literally to make her own military great again. It's just a thought, But if not, I don't know. I guess just keep letting Russia dog walk you. And in that case, we're just going to sit here and laugh. We have no dog in the fight. Hey, you know, it's not our war. In your words, it's not our war. It's not our problem. Russia's not our problem, right? They're not sailing warships next to our shores. So, hey, you know, UK, have fun with that. Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.